Good morning. Such an honor to be here. I'm not sure how I'm going to handle going through all this right now. This is really my first time in a large group telling my story. Back home, I live in a small town that everyone pretty much knows my story, so it's just one that's out there. But Michelle approached me a couple months ago and was like, I really want you to come be a speaker. Actually, she didn't say come. She actually wanted me just to do it virtual, and I was like, no, I'm going to come. So she asked me, would you come and be the speaker and speak on the perseverance of tragedy? And she was like, just think about it. I know it's a lot. And so I went off and I prayed about it. And, God just showed me that my testimony can help others. And that's why I'm here today. But he also showed me I doubted my prayer life. I really do. And Michelle will be the first to tell you, because I'm always going to her, I need help with this. I need this. I don't know what to pray for. I'm not praying the right way. So she's always been my go-to for that. And so she knows how much I struggled. So why would she ask me to come speak at a conference about prayer where I am not adequate whatsoever about? But here I am. But through working on what I was going to tell you about my story, and this is just a condensed version of my story. We'd be here for a long time if I told you everything. God showed me how much prayer was a driving force through the last 8 years of my life, right? Definitely, he's brought me here today to tell my story, and hopefully through that, with me giving you my testimony, they'll give you hope, and you'll see how prayer does allow you to persevere through the most unexpected tragedies. All right, so like I said, I'm from a small town, Bridgeport, West Virginia. Most people have no clue where that is. But it's always been labeled as like a hallmark town. Everybody knows everyone. They know the good and the bad, and they're more than willing to tell you about it. I attend the same church I grew up in. My grandparents grew up in that church. My mom grew up in that church. My grandfather was a deacon there. That's where I met Michelle, and our family kind of blended together really well. My pastor has been there since I was 12, so that just gives you a lot, that things don't really change a whole lot. But looking back, I had a great relationship. I loved God. I would listen to the messages. I loved him. I could feel him. But I had this distorted view of him. I always felt that I had to perform a certain way for people to love me, and this even applied to God. So I was the good Christian. I went to the church. I followed the steps. I obeyed him. I served. I prayed. But my prayers weren't the prayers that build this deep relationship with him. I placed this barrier between God and myself, that he was this guy that was unattainable, this God that sat up on his high throne judging me, and not someone that walked beside me every single day, that he knew everything about me already. He just wanted that relationship with me. He wanted me to come to him and tell him about my day, not someone that was like a stranger. So for the most part, this was how my teenage years went into my 20s. I was striving for that perfection. I made the good grades. I was valedictorian at school. In college, I was top of my class. At 10 years old, I decided I was going to be a physical therapist, and that's what I did. I strived to be to everything I wanted, just kind of fell in line. That's what I was going to get. Even after college, I married my high school sweetheart. I had my job that I didn't have to apply for. They came to me asking me if I would work for them. But the most precious thing that God did give to me was my 3 beautiful girls. But this striving for perfection and wanting to do what God thought that what I felt that I needed to do to obey God, I kind of put a barrier and just did prayer as this is something I'm supposed to do. So it was more of a formality. I didn't, like I was saying, I didn't have that deep connection with him. I didn't have that relationship, and you get lost in it. I mean, you're each day to day, you're just kind of like, okay, this is it. I don't have enough time. Thank you, God, and then moving on. Or this is what I need for today. So can you give it to me? It was very, very formal. Just I taught my kids do it. We do our bedtime prayers. Now lay me down to sleep, or at meals, and that was about it. they were just nice and they were safe. They weren't anything dangerous that I was just having a conversations with a stranger if I would have met you, not a God that loved me so much and knew everything about me, that was gracious for everything that would happen. But praying out of this obligation to him didn't strengthen my relationship with him. I still had a passion for God, but I just didn't have that. I wasn't giving all my control over to him. I was still wanting to be a little bit independent. So when my girls were about 6, 4, and 2, so they're still pretty young, I'd been married for about 10 years at that time, and I found out that my husband was having an affair. He'd been having one for a while, and my world just kind of came crashing down. Like, God, I've done everything right. Why are you doing this to me? What did I do wrong that you would allow this to happen? Because all my family life, my marriage, my children's life was being dictated by this affair. I no longer felt loved. I felt unworthy, and all of these lies kept filling into me. I was, why, what did I do wrong? Why did this happen? It wasn't out of my, I still wouldn't have control, I did something. And God, God was still there with me, but it took me trying to get away from the lies that Satan was allowing in, because he had this stronghold that, oh, all right, I can give in there, because even though you had nothing to do with the affair, I'm going to tell you all these lies about yourself, and I started to believe them. So my prayer life was not that I could have this deep relationship with him. I looked at God and as a genie in a bottle, like Beth had said, all right, God, this is what you're supposed to do. I'm going to pray to you. You're going to fix my marriage. And then that's the outcome I expected. I was so fixated on that that I didn't look to see what God was going to change in my heart. Eventually I did, but I had to step back, and some things had to happen for me to realize that. The problem with this being fixated on the outcomes is that my prayers weren't being answered to God, so I thought that I was doing something wrong. I thought that I was not loved by God. I was here not being loved by my husband. I didn't feel worthy for him. But then on this other side, I was like, God doesn't love me because he's not fixing my prayers. He's not fixing my marriage. So what am I going to do? What's going to happen? Why? It was just this vicious cycle of lies, lies, lies. And that's when the enemy likes to come in and isolate you too. Because here, I was embarrassed. I had nothing to do. It wasn't my problem I did not cause the affair, though I like to tell myself at that time that I did, that there was something I should have done to control it. But the enemy was here battling me, telling me, you're not good enough. You did something to cause this. You didn't live up to your husband's expectations. So I didn't tell anyone. It was probably about 2 months of me going on with these lies that I shamed myself. My family didn't know. They could see probably something was wrong. Some people thought I was sick. But we have to allow people into our lives and don't hide what we're going through. In 2 Corinthians 1, 3 through 5, it is not what we think we are qualified to do anything or on our own. Our qualification comes from God. So during this time, after I was isolating myself, I finally met with a Christian counselor. I opened up to my family and friends and let them in, and they helped me. By doing that, they were giving me the truth of God. I got into my Bible reading more. I was into the church more. I got involved with our children's ministry. I just kind of surrounded myself with more of the truth. And that's when my prayer life really started to change. I started not praying for those outcomes that I wanted, but looking to God to say, open my heart. What am I supposed to do in this situation? I can't control the situation. That's going to come from you, and it's going to be your will and how you're going to control it. You have to change not only my heart, you're going to have to change my husband's heart. Through the way, he did not change what was happening. My circumstances got even worse. He continued to pursue this other woman, and he would come to me and be like, we're just going to see what happens here. So you're not going to have any part of this. So at this time, my kids were very little. I'm trying to keep everything together. Eventually, it did end in a horrendous divorce, and the court battles, because both of them were attorneys, continue today. And this has been over 8 years ago. But I've had to relinquish and learn to give all this control over to God, not only myself, but also my children. And that's hard to do because they're my babies. I want to protect them. And that's just like how God wants to protect us. And we have to look at that as the bigger picture. But each day, I have to pick up my cross and give it over to God. I don't understand why it happened. I don't have to understand. And that's where God's changed my heart and my prayer life. It's not easy, and I don't see how others that don't rely on God actually get through some of the circumstances and tragedies that they would. I continue to stay active in my church. I was teaching my girls how to pray fervently, like not just those easy bedtime prayers or mealtime prayers, but actually talking to God and having a relationship. We do our devotionals together at night, and usually because they are different ages, it's like each night I spend a little bit of time with each girl so that they can have this personal relationship, not only with God, but also with me, because we'd gone through so much. That little small town that I was talking about spreads like wildfire when they have something going on. They know everything and anything, and there's lots of rumors, so you have to kind of block out that and know the truth and live in your truth. And, it's easy to want to go and talk bad about what had happened, but you kind of have to let that be and allow God just to heal me from the inside, and not get caught up in what was happening there. I put up barriers because I did not want to be hurt again. I kind of put everything into God. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to raise my daughters. I'm going to do the church thing. Wasn't looking for any relationships. There's definitely people that tried to set me up, and I was like, no, that's okay. I had a friend, one of my middle girls, our daughters went to school together, and she was like, I have this perfect guy for you. I was like, no, I'm good. That's good. Just keep him over there. Well, she invited me to a picnic. Lo and behold, she invited him, too, to kind of set us up. And he was this bright light. Like, the first thing I remember is his smile. And he just had this way with him. He loved everyone. He loved life in general. I'm not going to be able to talk about it. We bonded really fast. And I can remember sitting on Michelle's porch back in Bridgeport going, I don't think I can do this. I don't want to know the relationship. But she was praying for me. She was like, Heather, but you have this. God is giving you happiness. He's giving you this. I'm going to wipe away all those fears of rejection. I'm going to pray for you so that you can discern, like, this is really what he wants for you. So his name was Mark, and our stories were very similar. But he didn't live in our small town. He lived about an hour and a half away, but he had been traveling for the last 3 years down to our small town for work for a couple days a week. But he had 3 girls. Mind you, I had 3 girls. So when we started hanging out more and more together, they kind of all bonded really fast, and we did too. There was just this deep connection. There was a godly connection. I was hesitant, like I said at first, but sometimes when it's just meant to be, it was meant to be, and you just know that. So we ended up probably about a year and a half of seeing each other. We ended up getting married, which I had never even imagined that happening. We had a small ceremony in our church, and it was just beautiful. It was just our family, a couple close friends were there, and there was just no hesitation by that point that our family was meant to be together. So we have to acknowledge his sovereignty, that in Isaiah 55, 8-9, my thoughts are your thoughts. My thoughts are nothing like your thoughts, says the Lord, and my ways are far beyond anything you could ever imagine. just as the heavens are higher than the earth, so my ways are higher than your ways, and my thoughts are higher than your thoughts. With this being said, I definitely was learning in my prayer life to listen to God more. He had this plan for my life that that was not in my radar whatsoever. But I was learning to lean on him, and I had a godly husband that was willing to go with me and guide me along this as well. So early on, after we got married, we found out we were expanding our family, which was not in our plans whatsoever. So we had our 6 girls over here. Not only were we expanding our family, but it was going to be a boy. So I cried to God. I was like, what am I supposed to do with a boy? I only knew girls. I have no clue what to do with a boy. So he definitely had to give me a lot of encouragement and peace on that. So at this time, our girls ranged from 4 years old to up to 15. So the baby thing was going to be, adding that to our family was definitely going to be a challenge. But, I'm learning to listen to God. Shortly after this, my whole world came crashing down again. I got a phone call at 1 a.m. from my mom. She was like, you need to get to the hospital. My dad had just had a heart stent put in 2 days earlier. He was actually supposed to come home that day. It was on August 21st, 2015. 1 o'clock in the morning, he was coming home. 9 o'clock, he was scheduled to come home. And she was like, he's not doing good. Get home or get to the hospital. I'm heading there now. So this is a hospital that I worked at as a physical therapist. My mom works there as a physical therapist. I got there in half the time that it would take me. I whipped out my badge. I was running through. I was like, I got to get to the ICU. My badge swiped. I wasn't even listening or paying attention to anyone, and got there and saw them doing CPR on my father. To see that, I just fell to my knees. I'd been surrounded by it pretty much my whole life. I'd done, at that time, 18 years in the hospital. He had just been at the ultrasound finding out it was a boy with me. He was so involved in our life. He watched my girls for me so I could work. My grandmother was living with my mom and dad, and she was 92 with dementia, and he took care of her. He was the glue that kind of held all of us together. And to watch them doing that, I just fell and wept to God. Please, God, save my dad. I don't understand why this is happening. And it's just the crying out to him in that time and moment. And he didn't answer the prayers. And at that time, I had no idea why. Why would you cause, all this hurt and pain? And things were just getting good. How bad my life had been until now. And now, my family was building. He was supposed to see his first grandson being born, and here he's not going to be able to. I came disappointed in God. I felt like, you always hear, he's going to turn good. He's got good plans for you. He's going to turn all this bad into good. And I'm like, maybe that's not meant for my life. Maybe he doesn't do that for me. But he knows things that we don't know yet, and I still don't understand why that had to happen. But not only was my heartbreak for me, my girls that were everything to him, and there's unexplainable how my father was with them. I mean, he would take them at 6 weeks old to get their toenails painted. He had them all over town. Mind you, this is a small town. They would go, I would drop them off, or he would come over before I'm going to work, and they would make their rounds. They would go have breakfast somewhere. Everyone in town knew where they were coming. They kind of did the same thing all the time. He would take them down to a local bakery, and they would have milkshakes together. And if anyone said, "Oh, I saw your dad with the girls," so their heartbreak at that time was unbearable. They had never really experienced, even when their dad and I had gotten a divorce, it wasn't that bad. They fell in this. My father, their papa, was their father figure. He was the main person in their life. So to see their heartbreak and not to be able to take it away was unbearable. It's just unimaginable. But even when we can't imagine what God feels, when I said, I can't even imagine what God feels when we don't listen to him, though. So we have to consider that even in these times of troubles, that we need to use it for an opportunity for joy. So in James 1 through 2, it says, "Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider an opportunity for great joy." Now, that's hard to take in. Like, why would I consider losing my father? Why would I consider my marriage breaking up pure joy? The thing is that we have to know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. And so let it grow, for when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing. So I don't know why in these last 2 years of this time period, this was about 2013 and 2015, I went through a divorce. I started a new relationship. I got married. I lost a parent. I had to alter my job, which we'll get into that in a second. I had to move, even if it was, I moved 2 houses down, but we needed a bigger house with 7 kids. Because at the time, my old house only accommodated for 3. And going through constant court battles with my ex, that was the attorney, and it was all for show, but he didn't want to feel like he had the affair or shouldn't be on the paperwork that he did. And then having a baby. So there's some good things in those too, but they're still stressful. I mean, all those in 2 years to go through all of that. It was very stressful. But with Mark and great friends like Michelle and several other family members, I can continue to see God's goodness. He did have good plans for my life, for me. And I could see where my prayer life and just teaching my kids how to pray and praying with my husband and praying with my friends and being in these Bible studies, that there was things working behind the scenes, that he was still good. He was going to use all of the strategy for good. So that whole going back to, I had to change my job. So when my dad died, I did not have a babysitter anymore. And my grandmother that was 92 at the time and had dementia needed someone to be there during the day. My mom and I worked together as physical therapists, and my mom's outlet was to return back to work. She needed that. She couldn't be at home not working. Like, that was her coping mechanism. So I was like, okay, I will step back from work. This job that I strive so hard to have, I can do this. This is my calling. God's calling me to be home with my kids at the time. And I still hadn't had my baby yet. So, this was going to be a whole new transition as well. But my grandmother, after my dad died, she was needing just a little bit of help. She couldn't be left alone, to make any meals. Occasionally, you'd be like, let's get dressed now, or let's do this. But she still was functional. She recognized me, but didn't always know my name. So finally, in December 2015, our baby boy was born. So he was just this bright light and joy. I mean, he's something else. And I think eventually we have some pictures, so you'll get to see my family and everyone that I'm talking about. But he unified our family. He took this blended family of 3 girls on this side, 3 girls on this side, and he was that central bond. He was light of my life. So that little boy that I was so scared to have was a mama's boy. He looked just like his father and acted just like him, but he was a mama's boy and had me from the get-go. So all of this tragedy kind of was resolved with having this new outlook that this wasn't my plan, but God turned it into good. He brought this little perfect boy into my life. That little boy, though, having 6 older sisters, had to be places, because those 6 little sisters were not staying put for me to be at home with a little baby boy. So he got very used to traveling and being at all girls' events. So 5 of those 6 girls danced. And Mark's girls, around the time that we met, had moved to Florida. Even though they were in Florida, they were still with us all the time. I mean, we were there every weekend. I mean, not every weekend, but a lot of weekends out of the month. Or they were with us all summer long. They were with us. Any holidays, they were with us. So there was a lot of traveling. So this little boy became very accustomed to traveling and being around dancers and just all kinds of stuff and all kinds of events with his older sisters. So when, I think Isaiah, there's our little baby. So this is, where's the picture go? Bill's on top of it, huh? Anyway, we'll go on. Isaiah 65:24 says that God's always working behind the scenes, even when we can't see it. It explains this. I will answer them before they call to me. While they are still talking about their needs, I will go ahead and answer their prayers. All right. So the constant caregiving to my grandmother and my 7 kids kind of was taking a toll, because I loved being a stay-at-home mom, but there's a lot. I had to switch my roles. I was so used to being out, providing for my family, helping people, and I was like, when you're sitting, not that you ever get to sit when you're at home with that many kids and with a grandmother that at this time needed more assistance. I was physically having to dress her, some days having to physically feed her and be there constantly. Mentally and physically, it just takes a toll on you. So I think Mark could see that. And at the time, too, because I had those 5 of the 6 girls dancing, I was helping out at a local dance studio where I grew up taking at. And if I taught one class, it would pay for all of their classes. So that was a big win for me, because that could add up. So I was teaching here just one little class. It was a little baby, and I was there anyway, so it worked out for me. But the studio owner was like, why don't you take over this business for me? And I was like, no way. Nope, got enough on my plate. I don't want to do that. She's like, think about it. And I was like, okay. So I had gone home and just kind of mentioned it to Mark, and it was just kind of, nope, I'm not going to do that. A couple weeks later, he was like, I really think that maybe you should take over that studio. He goes, I think it'd be good for you. It'd be a good outlet. It would be something you could do in the evenings, because I'll be home from work and I could take care of the kids, and you can go do that because you're good at it. He was so encouraging to me. I was like, I don't know. We kept talking about it, and I prayed about it, and finally we met with the owner, and we're like, okay, we're going to do this. And so we took over the studio, and we had to rename it because she still wanted to work for me and use her own business name. So we named it Studio 9 Dance Academy, and the 9 is for the 9 members of our family. So in September 11th, 2017, we opened the doors to this dance studio, and my entire family, my girls that were in Florida, got to be up there because there was a hurricane that week in Florida. So they were up with me. We all got to do it together. It was a great bonding experience. This was ours. This is something that we revamped and redid everything together. This was going to be just something on the side, not something that I really thought was going to be something that I would continue to do, but for the time being, it worked. I was taking care of Grandma and the kids, and this is going to be my path for right now. But the best thing looking back, is I had a praying husband who encouraged me in my prayer life and encouraged me to go out of my comfort zone, because I was okay with just staying right where I was. He encouraged me to have women's Bible studies where I'm growing in my faith and growing in my prayer life. And God was showing us that he was turning all those ashes and all those hurt and all that pain from our past and turning it into beauty, because we were getting into this rhythm of life where we had a blended family, but we were happy. It was good. He definitely showed us that he had a great plan for us. But he also tells us we have to abide in him. In Isaiah 26:3, it says, but if you remain in me and my words remain in you, you may ask for anything you want and it be granted. Actually, that one's John 15:7. I think we changed it. And then I forgot to change it on my paper. I'm sorry. So just prior to the studio opening, I was consulting or going to Michelle and being like, I love how you pray. Like we've been in our Bible studies together. I need help. I pray and I'm doing it right, but I feel like there's something lacking in what I need to do. You look at everyone, even just like Beth, like I feel like I want to take all bits and pieces of everything and just apply it to me. I'm learning that it has to be my own, because my relationship with God is different than Michelle's relationship with God, different with your relationship with God. But she's like, well, why don't you take a Bible verse and use that as your prayers? So at this time, during the summer, it was actually in June, I started journaling. She's like, write it down. Because I was praying, but I wasn't writing them down. I was like, oh, I'll remember them, But sometimes you have to see it written down and look back at it later on to say, oh, God did answer it that way. Or, might have not have been the way that I thought he answered it, or I wanted it to be answered, but he did answer it. He answered in his way on his own time, not on my time. So in my journal that day, I wrote and prayed over Jeremiah 29:11-13. For I know the plans I have for you, said the Lord, plans to prosper you and not harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. And what I'd written, and I'll just give you a summarized version because I'd written like 2 pages of a prayer. I was really gung-ho that day because I was going to do something new. And I time-stamped it, like I put a time on it. It was 12:15 that day on June 23rd. And I said, in my prayers, I will seek you at all times, my darkest moments to my most glorious, my happiest moments. Please help me to turn to your word and to pray to you first and foremost, as I cannot do this alone and need your help in trying not to do it my way. It is your way and your plans for me that are truly the greatest and beyond my wildest dreams. So right at that exact same time as I had written that prayer, my husband was at work, and he had suffered a seizure. They took him to the hospital. I met him up there. I'd gotten a phone call from one of his coworkers. They're taking Mark to the hospital. I think he had a seizure. Not really sure what's going on. He was alert when he left. I was like, okay, all right, we'll get there. We're going to deal with this. It's okay. So I get to the hospital. They really kind of dismissed it and said, I'm not really sure what it was. He was cleared by neurology, that he probably just stressed out at work. Okay, he can't drive for a couple weeks. Okay, we'll do this. We can do this. So we got into our life. We started that dance studio. We worked hard. I'm a mother hen, and I didn't want to, I kept kind of monitoring him, especially with my background in physical therapy and medical field. But I kind of was like, God's got this. I just prayed to him about it. I'm going to go by your will. Let me not make it my way. So we were in our rhythm, not expecting anything. We got the dance studio going on, all the kids taking care of them. So in November 21st, my grandmother that I'd been taking care of at that point was bedridden, and she passed away. And even though, it was expected, it's still hard. It's someone that I've been caring for the last 2.5 years completely, and even before that, she'd been living with my parents for about 8 years. So on the 27th of November she died the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. So you had that long weekend. Mark didn't go into work. We kind of had our family. My 3 girls had to be away with their father because it was his holiday that year. And so we had the funeral that Monday when they got back. And on the way to the funeral, Mark went to work because it was a long weekend. He's like, I got to catch up on a few things. I'll meet you at the funeral. I was like, okay. So on the way to the funeral, I get another phone call from a coworker. Mark's had a seizure again. I was like, okay, I'm going to pass my kids off to my mom, and then I'll meet you at the funeral. I'll go see. We'll be there. Let's see what's going on. I get there, and it took a while before they let me back, but he was in CT, and they came back and was doing an intake and asked me all history and all that stuff about him, and he comes in and he's seizing again and again and again, and they're like, on the CT scan, he has a skull fracture. When he had this first seizure at work, he hit his head on a granite countertop and resulted in a skull fracture, resulting in a brain bleed in his head. So they're like, we're going to have to transfer you guys up to our trauma hospital about 45 minutes away. So here I am in my funeral clothes, call my mom that's sitting waiting for me to get there for my grandmother's funeral. It's like, I can't make it. Mark's going to go to the hospital by ambulance. It's not good. So she left her mother's funeral to come be with me, to meet me up at our other hospital, because that's the type of mom that I have. That we were a close family. So when we got to the other hospital, it was about a day and a half of testing, and he never came to. They had intubated him in front of me at our first hospital that I worked at. They did all kinds of testing. Really, I thought they more kept him sedated. He's going to break through with this. This is, it's just, let's give it time to heal. But somewhere along the time that the pressure in his brain got too high and he herniated and he was brain dead. So I could make a decision that I could keep him that way on the ventilator, or they would do one final test to see how bad it really was. And this final test, I remember holding his hand so hard and praying so hard to God while they took him off the ventilator to see if he had any brain function whatsoever, and he did not. So I know for a fact that the Holy Spirit intercedes for us in prayer. As Romans 8:26 states, and the Holy Spirit helps us in our weakness. For example, when we don't know what God wants us to pray for, but the Holy Spirit prays for us with groanings that cannot be expressed in words. So here I have my husband that still kept alive on the ventilator, that he looks alive to me. I want to keep him that way, but there's so many decisions that have to be made. He was only 43, and I wasn't expecting this. We weren't expecting this. We had our whole life ahead of us and our whole life of raising our family and raising our kids. I wasn't prepared to make these decisions, and he didn't have a will, so everything was falling onto me. We did keep him on the ventilator so that we could go through the organ donation process, which it sounds, okay, you go do, we'll do this and take care of everything. It's a 2-hour process from the standpoint of a family member being interviewed for appropriate matching. And here my husband's laying, all I wanted to do was be with him, but they take you to another room and they go through it. And at one point I can see where people would just say, nope, it's okay, I don't want to do this any longer, because it's a long process. But it was something that he had marked on his driver's license that he wanted, so it was one thing that I didn't have to make a decision about, because there were so many decisions I was going to have to make. So the only way I survived for those hours at the hospital, going through this process and having to leave him and riding home to tell my children that their father had passed away, and the days planning a funeral, and all the days following this, even up till today, that the only way that I can stand here before you and tell you is because of God. And through others praying for me on my behalf. I can, even then, I could feel it, but God had wrapped his arms around me to get me through that day, because if anyone's here ever experienced any type of grief, you can tell, like, you just feel like you're in a bubble, in a fog. Like, you don't even know how you got from one place to the other. But I know, because of my God, that he held me up. He walked with me. There's times that I don't know how to pray, and I'm thankful that the Holy Spirit does intercede on me, because most of those prayers were in tears. My prayers, most of the time, especially during that first year, were in my bathroom, usually in the shower, because I could sit there and cry, and the shower would just wash away the tears, or on my bathroom floor crying, because I could hide from my kids and not let them see that I wasn't the strong person they thought I was, or on the side of my bed, on my hands and knees. So my prayer life definitely changed, that I bow down to God, and I ask him to help change me and help change my heart. And I know I have a hard time finding the words, because it took me so long to even want to get out of bed sometimes, but God interceded. He sent people like Michelle. He sent all kinds of friends. He sent family members.
that would text me encouraging words, Bible verses. I still have one lady friend that her husband and son had passed away, and every day she still, 4 years later, still sends me Bible verses. And I do the same to her as well, but not on her part. Like, she is just an amazing woman. So he sends these people to intercede for us when we can't. It's hard living in a space where a head knows that God can do anything and change anything, but our heart is heavy because he didn't do it for us. And we have to step back, and we have to remember God is always active, even when we don't see it. When we can't detect his presence, we still have to understand that he is there and that his plan is so much greater than ours. God used Mark's tragic loss to save lives. Through the organ donation, he was a heart donor, a liver, both his kidneys and his lungs. That's a whole nother process. We have to write back and forth between each of the donors, and after so long, if they want to meet them, after you've written so many times that you can finally say that you would like to meet. We did get to meet our heart recipient. That's something that you can't put words to. And to finally hear my husband's heart beating and to know this family and put a face with what he saved their life and their family is so amazing. And we keep touch on a regular basis. Like, he'll call me up on the phone and be like, did Mark like chocolate? And I'm like, yes, he did. He had a sweet tooth. He goes, I hated chocolate, but I have to eat it all the time now. So it's like, that's like little pieces that God's like, oh, like, here's this little thing that I'm giving you Mark back. But the other thing is, I don't have all the answers why my son has to grow up not being able to play catch with his father, or just last week he started kindergarten, and why his father couldn't be there. But I have joy in seeing this other family, and his name is Donnie, that received his heart, get to go see his grandsons play ball, where at the same time I'm watching my son not have his dad there. But my heart doesn't stay stuck in that. I do have that, because all moments in my life now are good and bad. Even the happiest moments are sad because he's not there. But I get so much joy and so much happiness knowing that Donnie is able to see his kids and have his life and all that. And I get to see a piece of Mark living on in him. So just like this, I do know that God is good and his plans are even better. And with this, we will continue to pursue a deep relationship through our prayer. That's how God draws us closer to him, draws us into his heart, and that I can lean on him in the face of all the tragedies that I've been through. So you do need to surround yourself with those that can intercede in prayer for you. I had family members that would come and stay with me. I had friends that would come and stay with me because they didn't want me to be alone. That small community that I said that could be bad sometimes can be very good. They made meal donations, so every day for about 6 months, I didn't have to plan a meal. It was close to Christmas because this was the end of November. They bought my kids Christmas gifts. It was just, they would write encouraging letters to my children. 11 days after Mark passed away was Maddox's 2nd birthday. So that community that was so involved in knowing everything about my life stepped up and brought a fire truck, the real actual from the fire department, fire truck with goodie bags for everyone, and pretty much planned my son's birthday party because they knew that I couldn't do it. It took me a while to get back into church because it was hard. It was hard to see everyone's life going on and all this happiness and me being stuck back at the hospital, knowing my husband had died. I was stuck back there. Church was, we had so many good memories there. It was where we got married. It was where, my kids were baptized. It was where we dedicated together our son to be, dedicated him to the Lord. This is how we're going to raise him. And but it was the last place I ever saw my husband's face before they closed the casket. So every time I walk into that church, those are the feelings that rush through me even today. People wouldn't know that because I don't let them into that, but God knows where I need to be, and I'm still there. I'm active in our church. I help with the youth group now. I want my kids to see that even though God allows tragedies to happen, he's still there with us. That we are going to face tragedy. We're going to face trials of every kind, and we can't give up on God. So we have to not lean on our own understanding. As Proverbs 3:5-6 says, trust in the Lord with all of your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. Seek his will in all you do, and he will show you which path to take. So just because we feel that there's a lack of intervention sometimes, or we don't understand his timing or why he didn't answer a certain prayer a certain way, I can see where he will intervene and bring beauty from ashes. So over the last few years, I questioned why. Why would this happen? Why would you allow this to happen? Sometimes, even after my husband died, I tried to figure out what I could have done differently to prevent him from having that seizure, or from having that. And when that does that, it just compounds our heartbreak. So we do have to resist the attempt to control it. Control, how could I fix this? How could I have done that? And just trust in God, and that he will bring good for it. And as he's done for me too, in my circumstance, I've seen God shape me, and he's called me in a way that I've never seen possible. Because believe me, none of this was in my plans. None of it. And at the end, all my job is to be obedient to God, because he has an amazing way of drawing our hearts closer to him. One last thing we need to do is remember that he works in all things together for good and supplies all of our needs. So as in Romans 8:28, which one am I going to do? We have to yield to his control. 8:28. And we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to the purpose for him. In Philippians 4:19, and the same God who takes care of me will supply all needs from his glorious riches, which have been given to us in Christ Jesus. In Psalms 139:5, go before me and follow me. You place your hand of blessing on my head. And lastly, on Psalms 119:50, your promise revives me. It comforts me in all of my troubles. And this is so true. So you recall that dance studio that I didn't want. My husband prayed for me to have. So about 8 months or so, a year ago, after Mark had passed away, we get a phone call to the studio, and they're like, hey, are you open to us filming a movie here? And I'm like, a movie? Is this some kind of scam? I'd never heard of this company. So the company is JC Films. They are a Christian faith company. They're not from West Virginia. They had started a movie back around the same time that Mark had passed away, and they're like, we need this B story. We need a dance studio. The owner had a friend that lived in Bridgeport, so he was down in the area. And it was like, well, why don't you call this one dance studio? The other dance studio never called them back. So he's like, well, try this one. So I was like, sure, okay, after I figured out it was legit. And the only stipulation was it needed to be decorated for Christmas. Well, Christmas was the time. We'd just done that 2 days before my husband passed away. We had our whole house decorated for Christmas. So getting closer to the time when they were going to film at the dance studio, the owner says, the house fell through that we were supposed to film at. The doctor is going to be out of town. Do you know any houses? And I was like, okay, I guess my house. You can have my house. But he's like, you're going to have to decorate for Christmas. So God kind of placed that on my heart. Like, this was like a trial run before Christmas, because granted, this was in the middle of summer. So the house had to be decorated inside and outside, and I had all this free time too to decorate. But my neighbors thought I was crazy, because I never told them what was happening. So here's this crazy widow lady with 7 kids that was decorating for Christmas in the middle of summer. The other stipulation was someone was coming to the house to film with them,
and it was Dean Cain. So if you don't know who Dean Cain is, he is Superman from Lois and Clark's The Adventures of Lois and Clark. So I was like, okay, this is going to be fun. They get there. We film at the dance studio. My girls got to be in the dance part. They got to be in this movie, and they were all coming back to my house afterwards. And we get to the house. Well, in one of the pictures you can see, there was a big family portrait, like life-size family portrait, because I had it of my family of the one picture you saw with all of my girls and when Maddox was a baby. So they come up. He's like, we can't have that in the film. We need something different. Do you have something Christmassy? Because obviously Dean was playing a character in it, so we couldn't have a picture of Mark and I in it. I was like, well, there's this picture of Santa Claus. And Michelle would get a kick out of this because she was just there like a couple weeks before Mark had passed away, and he was like giddy. Like he had everything out. Like I'd come home from a dance class teaching, and he had the kids all decorating for Christmas. And he pops out this Santa Claus picture. I was like, no way. We're not putting that up in my house. And it's so funny because he was like, do you have anything that can go on the mantle? And I was like, well, I have this Santa picture, but I don't think you really want it. He was like, that's perfect. So Dean pulls this out, and I kid you not, the whole entire scene of this movie plays out just like Mark and myself. And I'm like texting Michelle. I was like, you will never believe what happened. But yeah, so that's just something way God kind of works, and it's like, oh, Mark's here with you, you know, like this. He got that Santa picture just for this moment. And also one little tidbit, just little ways that he works. That for Maddox's first Halloween, he was dressed as Superman. For his second Halloween, he was dressed as Clark Kent. Don't ask me why. That was so, like, I was not a big Superman fan. I was not any of that. It just so happened that's what it was. And here, for the third, you know, like, he's two in this picture, so he'd only had 2 Halloweens. Both those Halloweens, he was dressed as this man right here that he finally got to meet. And Dean was so good with him. So now, come to find out that the owner of the company, Jason, has a little boy that's 5 months older than my son Maddox. And Jason was kind of new to the area, and he was like, oh, we should get the boys together. So we did, and those 2 boys became the best friends ever. Like, they were 2 peas in a pod. They did everything together. So this one is Carson and Maddox. And their relationship developed really fast. Can't say there was anything between Jason and I. Those barriers were way off. I was like, I'm not looking for anything. But I love that Maddox has a friend because this little boy is surrounded by girls. He needs some boys in his life. Somewhere along the lines, a friendship started to form between Jason and myself. And one of the first things I remember Jason saying, and I still tell them every single day, that he's like, I have no intentions. I was like, good, because I'm always going to be married to Mark. So get that out of your head. There's nothing here. Well, God, through my counselor and through friends and just prayer, he changed my heart. He changed that it's okay to move forward, that I can still love Mark, which I do every single day, and I can love someone else too, because this guy that came into my life through a twisted way of only ways that God can do and make a plan like this, is a father figure to my son and loves me like no other, and that together we make an incredible team. He definitely brought me out of my shell. I get to help out with these Christian films, which still was not on my radar. We travel all over the United States making Christian movies, and if you get on Amazon right now, you get to see some of his stuff. Well, that Superman, he's like Uncle Dean to us and to my family. So Jason and I ended up getting married 1 year ago, and of course, he turned our wedding into a movie because that's the way we do it. Dean was going to be there, so we might as well put Dean in the movie. So we had our wedding, and then he filmed actually not 1 but 2 movies during our reception. But granted, you know how my father had passed away, Dean stepped up and was like, I will walk you down the aisle. So I had Superman walk me down the aisle. And God just brings so much to our lives. You know, Jason definitely has a huge impact on pursuit to tell my testimony, to glorify God, and that's what it is. You know, my one hope is that even though I've suffered all these different trials, that if I change the life of one person through my story, then it's all worth it. All right? So we need to, no matter what the circumstance or the tragedy is, we have to keep our eyes on him. You know, God's will is so much better, and even though I don't understand, I have no clue why I had to go through a divorce, why I had to lose my father, why I had to lose my husband, why I needed to face all these trials. And just to tell you, it is not easy on Jason, because when you've had someone leave you with an affair and then have the other husband die, I am not easy on him at all. But I have to use God, and I have to face that it's not in my control. God's using our plan for something, and he's changing my heart. And I'll leave you with one last thing. Psalm 6:9, the Lord has heard my plea. The Lord accepts my prayer. So God will breathe life into all the shattered pieces of your story and create something new and more beautiful than ever. We just have to position ourselves in our prayers and see it and trust in his plans. So I thank you guys for having me.